Hello, I'm Scott Thompson, and welcome to After 10. President Park Geun-hye says a reunification of the two Koreas would be a bonanza for all of Northeast Asia. And today on the show, we're joined by someone who seems to agree, Jim Rogers, investor and author of Street Smarts. Next on After 10.
저는 한마디로 통일은 대박이다 이렇게 생각을 합니다. 지금 세계적인 그 투자 전문가 이분이 만약에 남북 통합이 시작이 되면 자신의 전 재산을 다 이 한반도에 쏟겠다. 그럴 가치가 충분히 있다.
A world-renowned investor who has recently expressed a will to put all of his money into a unified Korea. Jim Rogers, chairman of Rogers Holdings. Why is Rogers, one of the world's most well-known investors, paying such close attention to the possible unification of the Korean peninsula? Various media outlets have released analysis on the investment value of a unified Korea. Jim Rogers also agrees with the Korean government's recent drive for unification. Rogers founded the Quantum Fund in the early 1970s, and during the following 10 years, the company gained 4,200% rate of return. Rogers' International Commodity Index has been up around 250% since it was established in the late 1990s, and Jim Rogers has been taking a leading role in the field of investment. He has shared his high expectations for a unified Korea in his recently published book. On the speech he has recently delivered under the title Why Invest in North Korea, he also mentioned about high economic potential of a unified Korea. Meet Jim Rogers, the world's renowned investor, and hear more about the investment value of Korea after unification.
Mr. Rogers, thank you very much for being on the program.
I'm delighted to be here, Scott. I'm a great fan of Korea.
Now, President Park Geun-hye recently said that reunification of the two Koreas would be a bonanza. You seem to agree. You've recently said that you'd be willing to put all of your money into Korea after reunification. That's been making quite a few headlines here in Korea. What's your reaction to all the attention?
That's not quite exactly what I said, but it will be a huge bonanza. Listen, when you combine Korea, you're going to have cheap, educated, disciplined labor from the north, huge natural resources from the north, massive capital in the south, massive ability in the south, right on the Chinese border. I mean, it's going to be the most exciting country of the next 10 or 20 years, more exciting than China, more exciting than Myanmar. It's going to run circles around. Japan is against it because Japan will not be able to compete with the United Korea. It's going to be a powerhouse. I can't tell you how excited it will be.
When you look at it from a professional investor's point of view, when you look at the potential, when you look at the ceiling, what do you see as being that potential?
There is no ceiling. You're going to have a country of 75 million people on the Chinese border with all of the attributes I just outlined. I can think of no country in the next 10 or 20 years after unification that will be nearly as exciting as Korea will be at that point.
And in terms of reunification, you said you believe it could happen within the next 5 years.
Yeah,
why do you say that?
I know you're all going to be shocked, but if somebody had said in 1984, I didn't say it, but if somebody had, that Germany will be united in 5 years, you would have walked out and stopped listening to it. Willy Brandt, the head of West Germany in 1989, said it will not happen in my lifetime. It happened, less than a year later. Sure. It's going to happen. I don't know why you all don't see it.
So why 5 years though? Why do you give that time frame?
It may happen sooner. My point is, it's on the horizon. It's coming. Get ready for it because it's going to happen. It's not going to happen because of politicians. I remind you that East and West Germany did not unite because of politics. Willy Brandt said it's not going to happen. George Bush went to see Lech Walesa in Poland and said, calm down, you're going to cause a war with all of this talk about unification and opening up. They told him, don't do it. They ignored him. You ignore the politician. Now, I will say President Park has certainly startled me and certainly impressed me that she says, wait a minute, maybe he's right. Maybe it could happen. Maybe it should happen.
That surprised you?
It surprised me a great deal because normally you get nothing but propaganda from South Korean politicians and North Korean politicians and American and certainly Japanese politicians. Normally they all say blah, blah, blah. But I think she might mean it, and I think she might do something.
Taking a more long-term perspective, you mentioned people should get ready for this and start preparing. What are you doing specifically to prepare for a possible reunification?
Scott, the problem is I'm an American, and it's illegal for Americans. It's probably illegal for me to say North Korea, you know, because North Koreans, we cannot do anything there. If I could, I would put a lot of money into North Korea, but it's illegal for me to do. I keep trying to find companies, Chinese companies somewhere that are doing a lot of business there. I have not found them yet, partly because I'm so lazy.
In terms of other people that can maybe do something, you talk about, again, getting ready, making these preparations. What does that look like to you?
There are people, the Chinese are pouring money into the northern part of North Korea. The Russians are starting to, you know, just opened up the railroad. The Russians are putting a lot of money into northern, especially the northern part of North Korea. They see what's coming. I see what's coming. It's only you and South Korea and America and Japan that's trying to stop what's coming. It's coming. So figure out a way, and if you find a good way, let me know. Don't announce it on TV.
Sure.
You let me know so I can invest too.
Sure. One thing you have been doing, you made headlines for this as well, was you bought a lot of stamps and coins from North Korea. Tell us about that decision. Why did you do that?
In my view, North Korea is going to disappear. That's my whole point. There's not going to be a North Korea in a few years. And so and it's legal for me to buy stamps. It's legal for me to buy coins. So if North Korea disappears, which it will in my view, then these coins and these stamps will have great collector's value. And the risk with the coins anyway is the price of gold. I mean, gold and silver could go down, but I don't think these coins will go down as much because there will be collector's items. There will be no North Korea in a few years.
Let's look at the possible landscape after reunification, looking at industries, the potential there. What are some of the promising industries when you look at the landscape afterward? What do you see?
Scott, have you been to North Korea? Probably not.
No.
Okay, I was only there once. Let me tell you, they don't have anything. They don't have soap. They don't have electricity. They don't have fertilizer. Anything that you can think of, look around your life, they need it. So there's an opportunity for anything in journalism. You know, they don't have anything in North Korea. So whatever you think you're good at, that's the opportunity in North Korea.
Mining, agriculture, the DMZ, peace zone, it all.
They've got huge minerals up there.
Right.
You know, as recently as 1970, North Korea was richer than South Korea. I mean, communism can ruin anything, and communism did ruin North Korea and dictatorship and all the rest of it. They ruined North Korea, but they've got vast natural resources up there. Yes, agriculture, yes, mining, yes, all of the above. But yes, sheets. They don't have sheets. They don't have anything.
President Park has stressed the expected benefits of a unified Korea on international stages.
동북아에 어떤 새로운 그 성장 동력을 제공할 수 있다는 점에서 저는 통일은 대한민국 한국에만 대박이 아니라 그 주변국 모두에게도 동북아 주변국 모두에게도 대박이 될 수 있다고 생각을 합니다.
The Korean government has shown its will to promote joint growth with local communities as well as Northeast Asian countries.
북한뿐만 아니라 그 주변국 예를 들면은 중국의 동북아 삼성에도 투자 활성화가 이루어지고 또 러시아의 그 연해주 지방에도 이 투자가 연계가 됨으로써 주변국들도 어떤 큰 그 어떤 성장을 기대할 수가 있다.
You talk about those that are investing now. You talk about China. You talk about Russia. You talk about Hong Kong. They're all pouring money, as you said, into the north right now. That obviously speaks volumes about what they see there, the opportunities they see there. When you look at how active they are, give me a sense of, again, I think this goes back to the same point we're talking about, but what does that tell you, the fact that they are so very active right now in North Korea?
Well, first of all, North Korea's got great possibilities on its own. Now, that's going to lead, that's part of why we're going to have a unification. But the Russians, for instance, you know, Rason, R-A-S-O-N, I don't know how you say it in Korean, is the northernmost ice-free port in Asia. What the Russians say, why don't we develop the port? Because it will be the fastest way to get goods from Asia to Europe will be on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So goods can come into North Korea, put them on the railroad, and off they go to Berlin, off they go to Paris. That's going to be a huge opportunity. You should go to Razun and buy yourself property, buy yourself a railroad, buy yourself anything you can. They're huge opportunities. You go to the Chinese side where the border is. They're building new ways to get infrastructure to get into North Korea. There's a middle class now in North Korea, partly because of the Russians and the Chinese. All of this is happening. Figure out what they want. It doesn't matter what you figure out. They don't have it, and they want it.
There's certainly a vacuum to be filled there. When you look at the situation around, of course, the peninsula, it doesn't hurt, of course, having rich countries around as well, right?
No, you're wrong. The Japanese are against all this. The Japanese do not want this to happen because they know they will not be able to. Listen, Japan has already got serious internal problems. A declining population, huge debt. They've got their own problems. A very high cost place to do business. They will not be able to compete with you. That's a rich country that does not want this to happen. I'm not even sure America wants it to happen because the American army will have to leave South Korea. And the Americans say, well, wait a minute. We're the most powerful country in the world. You can't throw us out. They'll have to leave. They don't want it either. The Chinese want it. The Russians want it. And I hope South Korea wants it too.
What do you see as being the economic impact, though, on those neighboring countries? That might be another reason that Japan is a little...
Japan will have a hard time competing.
Yeah.
You're a much lower cost place to do business once you have North Korean labor and North Korean natural resources. The Japanese know this. The Japanese are smart people. Mr. Abe is already trying to debase his currency as a way to potentially compete with Korea. That's one reason he's doing it, because Korea's been running circles around him already. Can you imagine a united Korea? The poor guy, he's going to have serious trouble. He knows that. And that's a rich country that does not want this to happen.
You're talking up the benefits here of reunification. Let's talk about maybe some of the other side of the coin, shall I say, the risk factors. People point these out time and time again when they talk about reunification. What do you see as being the risk factors of this?
Risk factors? What risk factors? Is it risky that East Germany and West Germany combined? What was the risk? None whatsoever, except that the Russians lost some power. There's nobody who's going to lose power here in this case except America and except Japan. So that's a risk, but what's the risk to Korea? Listen, this will be good for Korea. This will be good for the world. It'll be good for Asia. I don't see any risk. What kind of risk factor?
People talk about the tax burden, the huge income gap, of course, right now between the two Koreas, economic recession. They talk about all these things. I mean, how valid are those concerns?
One huge difference in this unification is that you have China and Russia already putting a lot of money into North Korea. That will continue. And then South Korea will put a lot of money into North Korea. Yes, because of the opportunities. But when East Germany opened, who was putting money into East Germany? The Russians weren't. They didn't have any money. The Poles weren't. The Poles didn't have any money. There was nobody putting a lot of money into East Germany except the West Germans. But that's entirely different here. You have a lot of people who are trying to put money into North Korea to rebuild and open up North Korea. No, and all of that is somebody who doesn't understand the world when you hear that kind of stuff.
These things do tend to take time, though. I mean, do you see this as being an immediate thing where...
Why not? Why couldn't it happen this afternoon?
Yeah.
May I ask you, why is the border still open? Closed, I mean. Why doesn't South Korea say, okay, we'll open our side? Now, I don't think the North Koreans will open their side this afternoon, but why do you have the border closed? If a North Korean wanted to cross the border, why couldn't he? If a South Korean wanted to cross the border, from your point of view, why couldn't he? Now, maybe the North Koreans wouldn't let her in, and maybe the North Koreans wouldn't let the others out. But I remind you that the reason the Berlin Wall fell was not because of politicians. It was because the Hungarians opened their border into Austria. Said, okay, we don't care. You go if you want, leave if you want, come if you want. And all of a sudden, all these people flocked across the border because they could. It wasn't politicians. Now, all the politicians try to take credit. They all try to take credit for it now. That's garbage. As I said to you, George Bush went to Lech Wałęsa in Poland and said, don't do this, don't do this. You'll cause a war. The people didn't care and didn't listen. And the people won't care and won't listen to politicians this time. Maybe President Park gets it. Maybe she gets it. I hope so. and maybe others will too.
There is some precedent. You mentioned, of course, Germany. We've seen the integration of Hong Kong and China as well. What are the lessons that we can take away from those two situations and apply it to Korea?
Look at Taiwan and China. Technically, they're at war. You know, technically, they're not one nation, even though they both say it's one nation. Well, you see what's happened since the borders opened up? I don't know if you've been to Xiamen, which is the closest Chinese city. I first went there in '86. It was an armed camp. You couldn't even go to the beach because there were soldiers and bullets and guns everywhere. You go there now, it's one of the most prosperous, thriving cities in China. It is booming. And you go to the beach, there are no guns, there are no soldiers, there's no anything now. It's wildly prosperous because China and Taiwan have said, we're not going to have a war. Everybody's better off. Who's suffering? Who's it cost trillions of dollars that Taiwan and China are now essentially open to each other? Who has it cost trillions of dollars that Hong Kong and China have an open border now? Who has it cost trillions? Well, it did cost West Germany some money because there was nobody to put money into East Germany except them.
And you've also said, though, that the U.S., Japan, not actively engaged enough in this idea for unification. I think you've touched on the points a little bit here, but why do you think that is at the end of the day? Why are they not as engaged as they should be?
Because Japan doesn't want this competitor. Korea will be the most exciting country in the world once you're not united. And Japan knows that. Japan has a declining population. By the way, you also have a huge demographic problem here in South Korea. Not only do you have a demographic problem, you have a serious shortage of females. North Korea's got a lot of females. That's where you're going to get your wives, from North Korea. You'll get some from Los Angeles, some from Queens in New York. North Korea will bring lots of things, including new babies and new females. And you don't have enough females. Do you know the demographic imbalance in Korea? South Korea, I guess you do.
Sure.
That's another problem that will be solved by unification.
When talking about the U.S. and Japan, what then do they have to stand to gain from reunification? Not necessarily the private enterprise aspect of it, but in terms of geopolitical interests and things like that. What do you see there?
One thing you will gain from it, we hope, is peace. We don't have to worry about war on the Korean Peninsula anymore. That's a problem which is solved. Now, that doesn't mean that another war won't pop up somewhere, you know, in the South China Sea. As you know, people are throwing rocks at each other all around. The Koreans are throwing rocks at various people right now. But in the end, we hope, unless another war pops up, because people like wars, there's gigantic things to be gained. Would you like to wake up every morning and not have to wonder if the Chinese or the North Koreans are going to come storming across the DMZ? And don't you think in North Korea they'd like to wake up every day and think, the South Koreans are not going to invade today? That will never happen. All of this money that's being spent on arms and guns and armies in the Korean Peninsula, spend it on me. Just spend 10% of it on me.
Sure, sure. When people found out you were going to be on our show, we had people send in some messages from Twitter. They wanted to ask you some specific questions. The first one being, what effect will reunification have on Korea's economic status?
Everybody in Korea is going to prosper and boom. It will be such an exciting country economically in the future, because of the combination of North Korean labor and natural resources and South Korean brains and money, capital and expertise. 75 million people on the Chinese border. It'll be the new route to Europe. The sea route will suffer, but the railroad route through Siberia will boom. And you can put goods on the boat in, what's the port down in the south, Busan, right, or in Rasun City. And goods will go straight to Europe much faster, and Putin's going to make it cheaper. Everybody's going to be better off.
You'd have to assume there would be some growing pains, though. How long do you think it would take to get to that point?
Well, not very long, because once the border is open, I think Samsung probably could start a plant tomorrow afternoon. I mean, I don't know. You'd have to ask them. Sure. But I suspect a lot of people, the Russians would certainly start building things faster. The Chinese would start building things faster. I would get on the next plane, you know, and head to North Korea. I would look for things to do. A lot of people would.
Is there anything then that you would do perhaps to encourage reunification?
Well, I've mentioned a couple of things. One, every year you have this massive military exercise with the Americans. Now the North Koreans don't like that. Why do you do it every year? Why don't next year you say, we're not going to have the military exercise this year? Listen, the American Army and the South Korean Army have been practicing this for 50 years. They're ready in case there's a... But why don't you make a gesture and say, we're not going to do it in 2015? You think the North Koreans would say, we want you to do it? Of course they're not going to say that. They don't particularly like... If China and North Korea had a military exercise aimed at South Korea, would you be agitated? Would you be angry? Would you be upset? Why do you need to keep doing this charade? This is not 1950. This is not the Korean War anymore. Everybody who was alive in those days, nearly everybody is either dead now or was a child then. What is this? What is this? Why are you doing this?
Cancel him to send a message to the North, or just
send a message to the South too, to all your own people, and say, wait a minute, guys, we don't have to be angry and we don't have to be living under the threat of war. Why don't we think of something new? Why don't we take a different approach? Why don't we open the border? Why don't we stop these military operations? Why don't we send a signal that we want to do something too? We want unification. So far, all of you hear is, we want unification. But your actions do not speak as loud as your words. They don't believe it. I don't believe you. I know you're subject to American propaganda, Japanese propaganda, your own propaganda. Take a new approach. Come on, this is 2014. This is not 1954, believe it or not. You could take a different approach. And there are other things too, but we'll start there.
Final question here, if you would, please say a word to the policymakers, the entrepreneurs, the professional investors who are looking right now today at reunification. What would you say to them?
I am fine. Call me up. Send me an email. I'm looking for the same thing. You know, the problem is I'm an American. Other people, the Chinese, Russians, many other people do not have these prohibitions that I do. So I'm trying to find ways to invest in North Korea because it's going to be very... Buy land on the DMZ. When the DMZ is torn down, all of that land, which is very cheap now, because everybody's afraid the North Korean army is going to come through here and this land will be worthless. That land is going to be some of the most valuable land in the world, certainly in Korea, once the DMZ gets torn down.
You've certainly given us a lot of food for thought, I think it's safe to say. Jim Rogers, thank you very much for being on the program, sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Scott. See you again.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time, After 10.
We will continue to do our best to improve our show based on the perspective of our viewers. Always feel free to leave us any comments, great ideas, or suggestions you wish to share with us.